Joe and I are back from our 5th trip to southern Africa. I'd like to show you how to draw two of the most unusual animals that we saw. We began our journey at dawn in Madikwe, a camp near the Botswanan border. First came our briefing from the ranger and our guide, and then we started out into the African dawn.
Being one of the main trading routes between Cape Town and Bulawayo in Zimbabwe, there's a lot of ambushing of the ivory,
The African dawn is magnificent. I'll never see it often enough. As we trundled down the road, we saw lots of animals. We saw elephants, and we saw warthogs, and we saw impala, and we saw lions. But one of the most amazing creatures is the guinea hen. I call it the polka dot bird because it's pure black with white polka dots. And believe it or not, it blends in very well when you see it in the great fields and savannas of Africa. They travel in big flocks. Now, I started out by drawing a square, which is a shape I know you all recognize, and you can draw that on your paper. And then I'm going to go over it with my big ink pen because this is just the basic shape that we're going to start with. On this end, I'm going to make a little triangle. That's going to form the tail. And then the head is formed up here. It's a round circle. And then its neck is thinner at the bottom than at the top. And then you'll be able to put a little beak right in the front like that. Now, when I'm going to follow along with my ink pen, and you'll see that this particular bird has a little horny shaped, it's called a casque on the back of its head. But if you didn't put it on, it wouldn't look like a guinea hen. So here's your circle, and then in the middle you can put its eye, and they have kind of a reddish eye. And there's his beak, and it extends quite a bit into that circle. And then here's his funny neck. And then this part of his head is all red, and then he has, they're called wattles. You can add underneath his chin right here. That's where the wattles are. They're very small. This bird isn't exactly like a square, but what you can do is follow along the back and then just cut off that part of the square. And then on this side, cut off this part of the square. And then you can add that tail section. And that will give you the shape of the guinea hen. He is pretty boxy-like. Now, I just said guinea hen. They come as, they're called guinea fowls, all of them, and the hens are the girls. And then make two little legs. This is just where their legs come down, and that's covered with fur. And then they have 3 toes in the front and 1 toe in the back. And they look a little bit like a chicken, and they lay eggs that look just like a chicken's. And sometimes if you're very lucky when you're walking along in the wild places of Africa, you can come across one of their eggs. Now I'm going to color him in, and this is kind of the fun part because the black and white polka dots just begin to tell you all the fun things to draw about this bird. He has a turquoise neck. And so I'm just going to put this bright bluish turquoise color. Like that. And then around his face is red. And now that would be kind of like a chicken would have. And I'm leaving that little casque, that horny part. I'm leaving that and not painting it quite yet because that's going to be the same color as his bill. And there's his little wattles, her little wattles. And then the eye's pretty reddish color, but I'm going to add a little bit of brown so we'll look a little different. And I'm leaving a very small little piece of white there that makes it look like it's sparkling. Because that's the reflectivity that you see in its eye. And now I've got my yellow and brown I'm mixing together so I can make his bill. And it's kind of a dark ivory color. He's looking pretty cute. And let's see, I think the legs are kind of a grayish color. So we'll make his feet a grayish color. And then I've mixed up a lot of black for his body because that's a big space to make all black. And while I'm doing that, I can tell you a little bit more about these creatures because you may see them in the United States. A lot of people have them domesticated that live on their farms, especially horse farms, because they eat ticks, which are little bad bugs. They're actually can carry Lyme's disease. So people like to have these birds because they have extremely sharp eyesight. And they will eat the ticks before they can give Lyme's disease to dogs, horses, and even people sometimes. And people like to have guinea hens for another reason, because they are good watchdogs. When they see danger, they make up a big ruckus. And you hear this quack, 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 quack. And that was one of my favorite things to hear in the morning when we woke up. Sometimes we'd open the flap of our tent and we'd cease to find out what this awful noise was. I mean, it wasn't awful that it woke us up because we like being up in the early time in Africa in the early morning, but it sounded pretty like someone was getting strangled. So there's the guinea hen. Now her wing would be right here, but you don't really see it because it's all these black feathers. And then the fun part is doing the polka dots. And you'll want to wait till your black paint is all dry. And then this is really fun to make polka dots. And I would think if I was a little girl making this picture, I might even want to make other colors besides white polka dots. I'd like to use my imagination and think, hey, what if they had blue polka dots or red polka dots or pink polka dots? And I'm trying to make the ones closer to his neck and down on his feet a little bit smaller because that's the way the feathers really are. And then around the wings, there's a couple of longer white places. So I think that it's kind of fun to make all these spots. And this bird and the zebra have something in common in that when you see them close up, they look like very dramatic, but when then you see them in the wild, they really blend in, and because their shape is broken up by the spots. And I don't know if you can see over here, there's another kind of variety of the guinea that we also saw in Africa, and those are the crested guineas. And if you wanted to get fancy, you could put feathers on top of their head like the crested guinea fowl has. And they live in the forest, so they were a little bit harder to take photographs of because before you know it, they would be running under the trees and it would be kind of dark under there. It was hard to take pictures of that. But the other ones we could see, and they're very good flyers. They look pretty heavy-bodied, and do you know how big they are? About like a chicken. Not as big as a turkey. I'm getting carried away with these spots. And if anybody wants to make theirs look very, very realistic, when you get to the edge, you can make your spot look a little bit flatter because that's the way it would look with a perspective. The zebra, what a magnificent animal the zebra is. It's kind of like a wild horse of Africa. You can't ride them because their backs are weak, so that they're just useful to look at. They make everybody happy when they see them. I'm going to start with a simple shape, which is a square, but this animal is a little bit harder than some of the other ones that I've drawn for you. I'm going to make this square with my pencil. It's going to be a little bit lighter than I'm going to go over it with my marker. And about halfway down, I'm going to make a little dotted line because that's where his tummy's going to be. Legs are down here. Tail will be here. And then I'm going to use another shape. On this corner, there's 4 corners. On this corner, I'm going to make a rectangle, which is a square that's a little bit on the long side this way. And then on top of that, I'm going to make a triangle shape and cut off that triangle right there, because that's where the zebra's nose is going to be. And everybody knows that a zebra does not have a long pointed nose. It has kind of a blunt nose. So I'll start on the back. And you can, this is where his backbone would be underneath if you could picture that. So it will have a little dip and then a very round area right here, and then his tail will be an extension of his backbone. Don't make the mistake of having the tail come out here, because that's what I always did when I was little. I don't want you to make the same mistake. And the tail doesn't come, and it's not full like a horse's tail. It comes down a little thinly, and then it bushes out, but it's not as long as a horse's tail either. It's a very good thing to have in Africa because of the flies, and they can swish it and it'll make the flies go away. Insects and flies. And now this animal has a beautiful curved neck. Have fun drawing that curve. And then here are his ears. I'll put one right here. And they're a little bit bigger than a horse's if that's what you're used to drawing. And that mane comes down right between those ears. And now I'm taking this area right here and forming the neck. And here's that shape for its face, his face. And his eye, let's see, go down about a third of the way, and that's where you can put the eye. And I'm making a shape kind of like this for the eye. And I'm also leaving a little white mark in that too to give it more of a realistic look. And then he'll have a nostril, a round nostril at the bottom. And you can kind of see his mouth, and I'm adding a little bit of a rounded part here, which is his chin. And then all horses have a jowl, so I'm adding that. And now it looks like he has a really fat neck, but that's because I haven't made his mane yet. I'm just going to make another line connecting to his back, and this part will all be his mane right there. And you can see his head is a little bit from the side. So I'll make a little bump there where his eye socket would be. No, it wouldn't be an eye socket. It's just the ridge where the bone is further up on his skull, and then underneath that would be the eye on the other side. And then his little muzzle is black. Here you can see on this zebra here that this is black, and there's his nostril. And his eye is that dark color too. Now when you draw the legs, start a little bit further back. Don't put the first leg right here, because he needs to stand on that. You can just picture him putting his weight down on that leg. And the hoof is probably the hardest part. I just go like that and make a little triangle for his hoof. And they have very short pasterns. That's this part here. Not as long as a horse's. And their legs are quite short. And a big round tummy. And somewhere I read that that when they get fat, they don't get fat in their tummy, they get fat on their neck. That's where they carry a lot of extra fat. And then here's the back leg. That was always the hardest thing for me when I was drawing when I was little. And I don't know if you've ever heard me talk before, but when I was little, I only drew horses until I was in about 6th grade. And this was always the hard part, was their back leg, because it comes down like this, and this forms the hock, and then it comes down. It's very flexible. They get a lot of strength from that configuration. So there's his front leg and his back leg. And then this one will come down, but will not come down all the way to the ground. We'll call this the ground here, because we want to make him look round. And this, same with this one. It's a little bit further away, so that will give it the illusion that he's not made out of cardboard, that he's a little roundish creature. His head looks a little bit big, but maybe you can, when you're doing your drawing, you can make yours have better proportions than mine. And I'm going to start with my shading. So I'm using my watercolors. And I'm taking my water and putting a little bit of gray, which is just light black, with a little bit of a bluish tinge to it. And I'm taking the excess water and wiping it off on my paper towel. When I was little, I used markers or crayons or pencils, mostly pencils, because watercolors were a little bit frustrating because the water would run into each other. The different colors would run into each other. So don't be discouraged if your watercolors are a little bit more difficult. You can get the same effect with your pencil by just shading around the edges of the animal. The back legs I'm going to make a little bit darker because they would be further away. And just along all the edges, I'm just putting a little bit of gray to make him look rounder. Now, if I was in my art studio, this would take a long time because it takes me an hour to do an inch. I'd be very, very careful that this would all look smooth, and I would be paying attention to where the muscle groups are, and I would get an idea of where the muscle groups are just by looking and observing the animal, or I might take some photographs, or I might get an animal book. And I'd take the pictures that I like the best, that seem to reflect the animal that I saw. And then I put them on my art table, and then if I felt like I was guessing at something, I might use those to get a better idea. So and then he's going to be all dark in the muzzle area. So I'm just kind of putting shadows there. Now, just for an example, here's my pencil. If you didn't have watercolors, you could just do this. And then use the side of your pencil, and that would also make that shading effect. You do that all the way around. So that would be another way of doing it. I'm not using the point, I'm just using the side there. Now, I noticed that in this picture, on the zebras we saw in Africa, they had a little bit of a pinkish color right around their nostril there. So since it's a black and white animal, we might as well have at least one other color. I think also that they have a little bit of brown in their eyes. So I'll put a little brown in their eye too. And the hooves are a little bit darker. They're not shiny black though. They're mostly covered with dust. And I think the most fun part about seeing zebras was seeing their little foals. They were so cute. And they say that, I'm going to do the stripes next, that the babies, when they're first born, they look at their mother's face and they have this few minutes and they memorize her face. So when you see a whole herd of zebras, you'd ask yourself, how do the babies know which one's their mom? And they remember their mother's face, but the stripes. So I've got my my black, because I got to do the stripes next. And this is where I have to really, really pay attention, because you can see the stripes have a pattern to them. And like in the middle, you can start, that's where it's easy. And they go right down. But when you think that you just take a line and go straight down, well, because he's round and his stomach sticks out a little bit, they don't really go straight down. They curve, just like the actual animal. So I'm going to try to make those stripes curve down. And if they wiggle a little bit, that's okay, because look at here. They do the same thing. And you see, he's got a very intricate pattern on the back of him. I'm just mixing up a little black here. Because I never use pure black. I just put blue, dark blue, it's blue and brown together, and that makes my black. And now the stripes are coming sideways, because when they go down the legs, the animal's legs, they'll be horizontal. They'll be the same like the ground. And then they get smaller as they go down. And some of the zebras are almost white, and some of the zebras are almost black. So they vary quite a bit. And that will make it fun when you're drawing, that you know that you don't have to be exacting about it. And I think it needs another stripe right here. And then in the back, you might just see a few little stripes. Because on the inside of the animal, you don't see as many stripes. So it almost looks like a horse wearing pajamas. Striped pajamas. And then for his neck, and I can see in the picture that they're a little bit larger stripes, so I'm using my brush putting a little bit more pressure on my brush to make that stroke get fatter. Because those stripes are wider than back here. And I'm starting right up the mane, because the mane is striped too. And sometimes the zebras were a little bit wary, and it made me think maybe there were some predators around, either a leopard or a pride of lions. And sometimes they were less afraid of us. But usually we could get pretty close to them in the vehicle. We'd be on the road, and they'd be standing on the side of the road grazing, and often there'd be a wildebeest with them, which is a kind of antelope. That's a very magnificent animal, very hard to draw. And then here's where the stripes go from going this way to from vertically to horizontally. Oh, he's starting to look pretty nice. And then I can see his face is pretty complicated too. And I'm pretty much copying the picture that I have the photograph from, but when we saw the ones in Africa, each zebra would have different stripes. And they continue up his mane. And let's see, down his face. And around his eye. And I noticed that he should really have a little bit darker muzzle, which is what you call his nose area, and his chin. I'm going over some of those pencil lines that I did. And right on the edge of his mane, if you want to have your zebra look very realistic, you could make it a little darker right on the edge, because that's the way they really look. And also, let's not forget his tail. Hey, zebra, let's not forget your tail. And sometimes we'd see them all, the whole herd galloping off. Very agile animal that can just turn on a dime. And it makes you just wish you could bring one home. And just like the guinea hen, you would think that you'd see this from a mile away, but amazingly enough, because these stripes break up the shape of their body, you don't see them. I mean, they just kind of fade away into the background because they are in the tall grasses. And what I'm doing right now with this tail is I'm just lifting up my brush at the end so it looks like it's really fur or hair. And there he is. I think he's done. Oh, an artist always needs to sign their work. So let me do that. And when I'm doing it, I'm thinking of you following along or thinking about drawing your drawing later on. And remember to sign your work, because the more you practice, the better your artwork will be. And I think your zebra drawings will come out really well if you try hard. Have fun.